Hello everyone, my name is Tahukan, and I literally just saw Hellboy. It's horrible. I'm not kidding when I say that. It's a disgrace, a tragedy, a mistake. I had the unfortunate opportunity to see Hellboy today. It made Venom look like a flawless masterpiece. And Venom really isn't a flawless masterpiece. I think you all remember pretty vividly how I felt about Venom. So that should give you a good idea of how this movie actually is. Hellboy was originally going to be a sequel to the Guillermo del Toro written and directed films. The only reason they bailed on that idea and tossed it in the trash in exchange for this trash heap was because Ron Perlman, Hellboy, refused to partake unless they brought Guillermo on board, which the studios refused to. For whatever reason, they wanted to have a new director and a new writer. So, they pulled a Spider-Man 4 and went in a brand new direction. That direction was bad. It unequivocally was bad. They chose Neil Marshall to be the director and Andrew Cosby to write the script. Neil Marshall directed a bunch of TV episodes and one cult film, and Andrew Cosby is the founder of Boom Studios, a comic company. Neil is a fine director. He actually makes the movie look kind of neat, which he definitely needed. Unfortunately, Andrew Cosby wouldn't have none of that. Before I get into that though, let me tell you guys about the gore. I'm not a conservative person. I have no qualms with gore in films. However, that being said, I generally prefer if the gore is not done in random spurts that make absolutely no sense. I like it when it makes sense. I'm not gonna watch a movie just because I want to see 100 things that are fine on their own, just mashed together with no real rhyme or reason. It's kind of like the movie has a hard-on for it. I don't even know if there's a real way I can explain to you how random it is and how, but when it occurs, it's just fucking catastrophic. It's just fucking everywhere on the screen. But to be fair, the opening scene does make it clear the movie will be gore-filled, but Jesus, it doesn't prepare you for the senselessness of it at all. At one point, for instance, a character just crumples the bones inside two other characters, turning them into a literal sack of skin and guts and blood. The worst part of that was done in the foreground, for which I'm thankful, but why? Then, at a later point, there's an entire sequence of Hellboy that I'd say lasts about 2 minutes that's literally just humans being skinned and ripped apart by giant monsters. That they don't even make sense, by the way. They don't fit the artistic design here. That was intentional, supposedly. I don't think it was a good idea. It looks kind of like that game that came back a while back that I can't remember the name of. It was about a lot of gore and shit. It looked like that. One had giant floating arms. It had like 20 floating arms, but it breathed fire. Another one had a crown that was literally blood veins. And then another had stilt legs that went down people's throats and then split them. But we don't really see that. We just see it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense. It was weird. It was so confusing and random. The rest of the movie is pretty grounded in the Hellboy lore, from my understanding. I haven't read the comics, but it is pretty different than the original Hellboy movies. And to the best of what I could gather before I did this, it does follow the canon of the comics fairly well. This is an edgier movie. One that feels like it was written by a 14-year-old who thinks saying fuck is still funny as fuck. It's not. It's just random. You're not making anyone laugh. And the only saving grace is that Neil Marshall was able to semi-save it and make it semi-digestible. The keyword here is semi. This film wasn't saved as a whole, or even mostly. But let's move on from that and talk about the cast. Hellboy stars David Harbour as Hellboy, Mila Jovovich as Nimue, Daniel Day Kim as Ben Daimo, and Sasha Lane as Alice Monaghan. And you know what? For once, maybe actually for the first time in all of these reviews I've ever done, the cast was bad. Normally, the only saving grace I have for a movie is that the acting was fine. If all else wasn't, the acting at least was passable. But this really fucking wasn't. A lot of this is because of our great friend, Andrew Cosby, who decided that dialogue is hard. So why bother with subtleties, and instead, why not beat us with a dead horse every goddamn second? And my biggest gripe, beyond the fact that everyone is so goddamn wooden, except for Hellboy, is that this movie mainly takes place in Britain. So the main characters are Brits. That makes sense. So you're gonna cast British actors, right? No, we're not. We're gonna do a little fun thing. Daniel Day Kim is fine. Mila Jovovich is fine. One's American, one's Ukrainian. It's fine. It works. They do a good job. Sasha Lane, no, she just can't. She just can't. She's supposed to specifically be playing an Irish woman, and she sounds British. And even at that, she sounds more like an American doing a bad British accent than anyone who'd even be from anywhere other than America. It's jarring. Throughout the entire film, you're either drawn out of it by the way the actors seem so wooden, or by the fact 70% of what they say is cheesy and cringy in a bad way. Not even in a funny, enjoyable way, or like oh, that's a line from a... No, this is just bad writing. But now, let's talk about the story. The TLDR of the plot, without spoiling too much, is this. Hellboy has a midlife crisis and wonders if killing the things that go bump in the night is the right thing to do. He travels to Britain to kill bad things when he meets a witch who wants to fuck him to become Queen of Hell and Britain. Hellboy doesn't want to be King of Britain though, or fuck her. The plot is like a stream of consciousness. It just keeps going left and right without thinking much about how it got there, except that it did, and that should be enough. It isn't, to be clear. I'm saying that's what the movie thinks it should be. It's never good enough if your movie just goes a place and you never really get to why or how, it just happens. That's not a good way to make a movie. It's how you write a thing when you're thinking, hey, I got a great idea, let me write this down. It turns into incomprehensible garbage. The plot holes are more than I could even count, or frankly remember without seeing this movie 10 times with a notebook in hand. And I frankly don't hate myself enough to do that. Probably the biggest one is that the movie doesn't have a conclusion. Now wait, I'm sure you're thinking, what? How's that possible? Well, let me tell you, minor spoilers, but honestly, I don't give a fuck. Nobody should go into a movie not knowing it'll do this. So here, after the big fight, which isn't really a fight, but whatever. After it happens, after Hellboy wins, we zoom out and see London on fire, and pretty heavily destroyed. Naturally, you'd think they'd next go over how they fixed it or explain how the damage isn't that bad, because they won, right? Wrong. This movie fucking zooms out, and the next goddamn thing we see is a blank screen that says, 6 months later, Serbia. What? We never get an actual conclusion for what happens in England. Literally, Hellboy chops the head off, and then that's it. We get a little bit of dialogue inside, and then it just zooms out. There we go. They lost, apparently. And maybe that's the point. Maybe, he didn't win. This is a tragedy, not just in the way it's made, but an actual, genuine tragedy of a movie. But if that's the case, why does it feel like it's meant to be a victory? Why are they acting triumphant? Is it zooming out to show that their perspective of winning is actually not what they did and won? Am I actually overanalyzing it now and making an excuse for why it might be good, but it isn't good? Am I thinking more about this than they thought about it when they made the movie? Yes, it's bad. It's unfulfilling. It feels like the carpet gets pulled out from under you. It's shitty writing, and it's a shitty way to make a movie. I don't care if the excuse would be, well, that's the point. If that's the case, then maybe don't do a time jump. If your point is that they have to deal with the repercussions of what they did, don't completely gloss over the repercussions and just go to a fun little action sequence with music that's upbeat. Jesus, fuck. I honestly walked out of the movie and thought of 100 ways that could have been done good or better, or just make it passable. There's so many changes you could have done to make that better. You like heavy rock music? Okay, that works for stuff. You're gonna do that, then don't do these shitty music choices here and there. If it's an important scene, do the heavy music, but have it at a lower beat so it's bass, so it kind of rides under everything else. Don't make it this like high up on the guitar chord. No! In conclusion, Hellboy is a movie that's unequivocally bad. It's faithful to the comics in a lot of ways, and if you like the comics but can accept that the movie is a bunch of 90% misses and 10% hits, maybe you'd like it. But for anyone else, don't. Just don't. Not unless you hate your money. This is a Blu-ray watch, rent on Amazon or at Redbox watch. This isn't worth more than $1. And as for the, is it so bad it's good opinion? I'd say it really depends on what you look for in a movie like that. In any case, for me, it was a so bad it's a war crime. I give Hellboy a 3 out of 10. It had really good CGI for a $50 million budget. It had good direction for the action sequences, but not much else. And David Harbour was a good Hellboy, but everything else about this movie is a yikes. But what's not a yikes is wearing and repping some Tahukan merch. You can get my merch at the link in the description. I'm demonetized because YouTube is ran by a literal team of monkeys with a combined IQ of a toddler. Actually, that's insulting to toddlers. They have an IQ of a potato plugged into a wall socket. So I really appreciate it if you spend the money there. You can also individually support me continuing to torture myself with movies at my Patreon. The link for that is in the description, same for the store. If you like this video, I'd love to know why, and if you did see Hellboy, I'd like to know your thoughts on the movie as well. If you have a suggestion, also let me know. I'm always looking for good ideas for videos that you guys would like to see. And lastly, I stream only on Twitch now, so make sure to follow me over there at twitch.tv/Tahukan. And, as always, I'll see you in the next video.
Huge thank you to Patreon supporters Anonymous and Matt Porter. I really appreciate it.